This tutorial is part 2 of the collaborative level design tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to be talking about the importance of using prefabs when doing collaborative level design. If you're watching this tutorial, then you've probably already seen part 1, where we created 3 different chunks of a white box and merged them into a single scene. So we have these 3 different pieces, and all 3 of them merged together in a merged white box scene. So if you're working with multiple people, I want to introduce you to one of the most valuable things Unity has to offer, which is prefabs. I'm going to go to one of the sections. Let's say I will start with the forest section. And if you are going to have any kind of interactable objects, or even if you're going to have decorations that are spread across the level that should all be the same, basically any object that should look and function the same everywhere the player interacts with it, what you want to do is you want to make that thing a prefab. And it's helpful to make a placeholder version of it that is a prefab at the very beginning or just after the white box phase, so that you can place it around your white box. And the great thing about prefabs is it is an easy way to quickly change a lot of objects all at once. So let's say I am going to decorate my level with some kind of barrels or pots or something the player can smash, something the player can break open and get gold that's inside. So I'm going to make a placeholder object. I'm going to make a 3D capsule. Actually, sorry, I'm going to make a cylinder. 3D cylinder. And let's give it a color. I'm going to go into my materials folder and I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this material barrel. I'm going to say this object is a barrel. And I'm going to make it a brownish color, just so I can tell what it is. Drag that onto my cylinder. So now I have this cylinder object, and let's scale it so it's about the right size to be a barrel. And what I want to do now is I want to name it something. I'm going to name it based on what it's going to be. And then I'm going to make this placeholder object a prefab. To do this, the easiest way to do this is to create a new folder in your assets folder. So I'm in my assets folder here. I'm going to create a new folder called prefabs. And then I'm going to open up the prefabs folder, and I'm going to take my barrel object and drag it into the prefabs folder. And then I can even delete it from my scene at this point. So now I have a prefab of a barrel placeholder. And what I probably want to do is I want to place it around in my scene. And I can use Control D to duplicate or Command D on a Mac. And you'll notice that every time I duplicate it, it has this blue square next to it and the text is blue. That is what lets you know that this object is a prefab. So I probably don't want too many of these in the forest area. This is the place where the player is going to spawn, and I probably don't want too much for them to do when they first spawn into the level. So this is just to give them a little taste for what's coming later, that they can smash these to get gold out. So I'm going to save this section of my white box. I'm going to move ahead to a later section. Let's go to the city entrance. So in the city portion, this is probably where there'd be a lot of barrels. So I'm going to say that probably each of these buildings, these might be shops or something. And I'm going to say probably each of these is going to have barrels in front of it. Barrels of whatever they keep in these shops. So I'm just spreading these around, giving the player a few different places where they can interact with these. I'm going to raise them up just a little bit so they're not stuck into the ground. And I'll save the changes to this scene, and then I'll jump ahead to the last scene. Just put a couple in here real quick. Maybe there's some up on the stairs. Maybe this one's a little bit smaller because this is a little too big to fit on the stairs. If you are going to scale something like this, you want to make sure that you're planning on having an art asset that will still look good when it's scaled. If you start scaling your prefabs in the scene and you end up putting an art asset that does not look good when it gets scaled, then that's just something you'll want to be careful of. So let's go ahead and save that. And I'm going to go back to my first scene, the forest scene. And now let's say I have, if I wanted to have these interactable, I'd probably want to add a script to them that the player can, walk up and swing an axe or something to smash the barrel. But I also, at some point, I would start changing out my white box to use actual art assets. And so what I would want to do is I'd want to go and find this prefab in my prefabs folder and double click on it. So this is the prefab edit mode. This is where you can make changes to your prefab. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an art asset instead of this cylinder. I've imported an asset pack from the Unity Asset Store that has some models that I can use. And when you import a pack from the Asset Store, there's a good chance it actually comes with a Prefabs folder in it. And these are going to be prefabs, but in Unity, you are allowed to have prefabs that are a child of another prefab. So I'm going to find a prefab in this in these folders, and I'm going to make it a child of this, and then it will apply it everywhere that I've used this barrel in my scene. So I'm going to go under containers, and I'm going to find a barrel object, and I'm going to make it a child of this. So now I can see it is a child of this capsule. The reason why I chose to use the prefabs folder as opposed to the models folder is because the models don't come in with textures added to them. So I want to use the prefabs folder so that they would have their textures already applied. So on my parent barrel object, I want to remove the mesh renderer. Actually, let me undo that for a second. One thing that I want to pay special attention to is where the base of this is, because when I placed it around in my scene, I was placing it so that the base was touching the ground. So I want to make sure the base of my barrel model will be in the same place as the base of this cylinder. So I can see that it's right where the grid is. So I can remove this mesh renderer and the cylinder mesh filter. And I actually want to keep the capsule collider because I want this to be something I can interact with. So now I can lower the barrel down so that the base of it is at the grid, right where the cylinder base was previously. And I actually might want to scale this barrel a little bit taller. I think if I drag this one in so I can kind of see as a reference, it got distorted a little bit by the scaling of my barrel, or of my capsule. So I can see that I had made it a little bit shorter when I was creating the capsule. So I need to offset that by making the child object a little bit taller. And you could avoid this by just only uniformly scaling the capsule at the start. Once I'm happy with that, then I can use the back arrow to back out. And look at that. I have barrels all around my scene. Not just in this scene. I can go to one of the later scenes, and I can see that there are barrels placed in this scene as well. All the way up to the last scene, where I have the small barrel placed on the stairs. And I can see that the scaling that I applied to this has also applied now that I've replaced the art asset. This is a really useful thing to do when you are working on a team, because it means that you can use placeholders for your prefabs and everyone can place those placeholders. And then when you replace the placeholder with art assets, that gets applied to everyone's work and you don't have to manually go through and change everything. The really important thing is to make sure that you set up those prefabs as placeholders at the beginning and have everyone use the same prefabs. Make sure that each person on the team is using the same set of prefabs to decorate their level and not creating their own versions of prefabs. You only want one version of the prefabs that you are using unless you need variations. Now, if I wanted to have some different types of barrels, then I might have multiple prefabs. But I want everyone on the team to be using the same set of prefabs when they're decorating their portions of the level. So this gives you an idea of how you can use prefabs to make your collaborative level design process quicker and more effective and more efficient. And I hope you found this useful, and I hope you'll join me in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.